Welcome to the 2023 Fleece-Lean Quilt Along. I'm Laura Struck from Made Peachy, and over this series of videos we're going to work towards creating a sampler quilt. This 9-block sampler quilt features a selection of products from the Fleece-Lean quilting range, and each video will walk you through the process of start to finish to create each unique quilting block. Block number 8 in the sampler quilt is a string block, and this has been made with Fleece-Lean M12. Block number 8 in the sampler quilt is a string block, and for that we are going to be using some sew-in interfacing. So to make the block we're going to need a cutting mat, ruler and rotary cutter, a selection of 5 prints, and I've mixed some different shades of fabrics here, so reds and greys, and our sew-in interfacing. The interfacing we're using for this project is M12, which is a medium weight sew-in interfacing. Using the rotary cutter and ruler, trim down the fabrics to create some fabric strips. So across the 5 different prints, I've created a selection of fabric strips, and these range in width from 1 1/4 inch right through to 2 inches. Trim down the M12 sew-in interfacing to create 4 squares that are 4.5 by 4.5 inch squares, using a rotary cutter and ruler to get really precise squares. Taking a piece of the M12 interfacing, which has been trimmed to 4 1/4 inch squares, I'm going to begin by laying my fabrics into position. So I'm going to take my first strip and place that across the centre. I want to ensure I've got a small amount of fabric overhanging at one edge, and here there's quite a large portion of fabric, but we'll be able to use that later. I'm going to take my second strip and place it right sides together. I'm going to align the raw edges, and I'm going to pop a pin to hold those in place. With that pinned in place, I can take it to the sewing machine and I can work a 1/4 inch seam to secure those pieces together. At the sewing machine, I've just brought my needle down so that I'll be working a 1/4 inch seam from these raw edges. I'm using a size 80 needle and a 2mm stitch length. I'm going to work my stitches 1/4 inch all the way along to join those 2 strips into place. The first seam has been stitched, so I can take the pin out and I can trim away some of this excess fabric if I'm careful and make sure that I cut past the corner. I can set these scraps aside and we can use them for other blocks. So I'm just going to take my iron and just run that over those stitches before opening up and just pressing that seam open. Now I can take my next piece of fabric and again position it right sides to right sides, secure with a pin and stitch to join. Once that seam's been stitched, we can carefully trim away any of the excess that extends beyond the interfaced square. Remove that pin, just setting those stitches before pressing the fabric over. We're going to rotate the block and we're going to work on the second half of it. So I'm going to place my fabric again, right sides to right side, securing it with a pin and working a straight stitch all the way across to join those 2 sections. Once that seam has been stitched, I can remove the excess fabric and press the section over. So we have one remaining strip to add to our string block. You can see here that we want to make sure that all of the interfacing is covered. So when you're adding the final blocks, you can just quickly check that it is, once it's stitched in place, going to extend and cover the interfacing. If you find that it's coming up slightly smaller, you have the option of replacing the strip entirely and using a larger one that's going to cover it, or you can simply add in an additional strip to make sure that all of the interfacing is covered. So here our strip's wide enough. I'm going to just ensure that it covers the fabric, lays flat and secure with a pin, and I'm going to sew that into position. The final strip's been added, so we can take out a pin and trim away any of the excess fabrics and carefully press that over to the right side. What we've got now is a string block where all of our fabrics are secured onto the interfacing. We're going to tidy that up by giving it a nice trim. Here we've got the completed portion of the string block. So we've got the M12 interfacing uppermost, and I'm going to carefully trim away the excess fabric that runs along the sides. So just rotating the block around and removing any excess fabric that extends beyond the M12 interfacing. We have a very precise 4.5 inch square. So we've trimmed our square down and we've got a very neat, precise block. And I'm going to just give that another press. The next step is we need to repeat the exact same process to create the remaining 3 elements that will make our string block. With all 4 elements of the string block created in the same manner, so layering the strips right sides to right sides, working a 1/4 inch seam and pressing open, we've got 4 portions that will make our completed block. So we just need to arrange the fabrics and pieces as we prefer. I like my string block to work around like this. Of course, you can have them working in different orientations. You can have them moving around whichever way you want your fabrics to flow. So with your 4 blocks created, we then need to join them into 2 rows and then join the 2 rows together to make the completed block. Placing the first 2 elements right sides together, we're going to align the raw edges and pin or clip in place. Work a straight seam, taking a 1/4 inch seam allowance from the top to the bottom to join those pieces. With our seam stitched, we're going to repeat the process, layering the second 2 elements right sides together, securing with pin or clips, and then seaming with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. With the 2 portions of the block stitched together to make rows, we have the top and the bottom rows completed, and we need to join here along that centre seam. Where we've got all of these elements meeting, we want to avoid bulk at the centre, so we're going to press the seam so we have the seam allowance pointing in one direction for this portion and in the other direction. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up and press my seam so that my seam allowance lays towards the right hand side on this portion. And for my second block, I'm going to ensure it lays towards the left hand side. Once pressed, we can lay those right sides together, seeing where the seams are going to neatly nest. That's a great opportunity just to align those seams on the inside, and you can secure with a clip or a pin. And we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to secure these elements together with a 1/4 inch seam and a straight stitch all the way along the bottom. Now we've worked this centre seam, we can open up and reveal the completed string block. So we're going to just press that neatly, and the string block is ready for quilting. Be sure to check out the other videos in the series to create all 9 blocks of your sampler quilt. You can find our Quilt as you go method video in the series also, and this will show you how to piece together your finished sampler quilt. Thank you so much for joining me for the Vliseline 2023 Quilt Along. You can find out more about the Vliseline products on the Vliseline website at vliseline.com, and you can follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube at Vliseline UK. You can find me online at madepeachy.com. Please do share your projects online and tag us in your makes. We do love to see them.